Hello, my name is Phyllis Fry. I am the president of the American Coalition for Property Rights. I'm here to bring the truth to the American people about the encroaching threat to our right to own private property in the United States. I'd like to begin with a fairy tale. It's called There's No Place Like Home, a fantasy. Once upon a time, there was a man and a woman who worked very hard to save enough money to someday build their dream home. That day finally came. Their home was built just the way they liked it. Inside, the layout of the rooms and placement of the furnishings and artwork were finished to perfection. All the architectural features and materials they chose were precisely what they wanted. They lived happily in their beautiful home for a number of years, and one day they decided to take an extended vacation. They left their home behind in the hands of a capable caretaker and went away, worry-free. A few weeks later, the couple returned home. When they opened the front door, they were horrified by what they saw. The living room had been moved upstairs. The master bedroom was now where the library used to be. The kitchen had exchanged places with the media room. The master bathroom was in the foyer, and 2 bicycles were in the garage where their cars had once been. All of the furniture and artwork had been replaced. Nothing was familiar to them in what was once their dream home. When they asked the caretaker what happened, he said that this was his vision for how he thought they should live. He said he had studied all their habits, all their behaviors, and this would be best for them. End of story. You see, this fairy tale illustrates what happens when neighborhoods of private homes are replaced with sustainable communities. You do not get to choose how or where you live. Unelected bureaucrats and federal appointees do. Your local elected officials no longer have a say in the decision-making process in shaping the future of your community, and you had no say at all. Suddenly, your home is being taxed in the extreme to pay for the new sustainable community. Can't happen here? It already is happening here. And this is what you need to know so that you will know how to protect your private property rights and retain the right to choose how and where you live. You might ask, but how can someone else tell me how to live? And just what is a sustainable community anyway? And that is what I have come here to tell you. In the 28 Principles of Freedom, written by the founding fathers of our country, I quote, "Life and liberty are secure only so long as the right of property is secure," end quote. John Adams said, and I quote, "The moment the idea is admitted into society that property is not as sacred as the laws of God, and that there is not a force of law and public justice to protect it, anarchy and tyranny commence." Thomas Jefferson knew that the private property, whether it's a skyscraper or a cottage, it is what separates each of us from the king or the sultan or the czar. Because he knew that no government is worthy of the consent of the people unless they have the right to pursue their happiness and have the right to own private property. It is the cornerstone to peace and prosperity in our country. I'm going to show you a 7.5-minute long film called Are Private Property Rights Sustainable Too? Following the film, I'll provide you a PowerPoint presentation that gives you the information you'll need to protect your private property rights.
We've heard a lot about sustainable development, but what about property rights? Are they sustainable too? Few things mean more to us than our property. It is not only shelter, but a way to build savings and something we can pass on to our children. Yet all over the country, private property is under attack. The Sacketts in Idaho are fighting the EPA to build their home. Homeowners in Washington state lost the use of 65% of their property thanks to local zoning regulations. And 1,500 property owners in Florida are being forced out of their home by the local environmental agency. And it's not just small homeowners. In Montana, Big Meadows grazing has lost the value of thousands of acres of land to a conservation easement with the Department of Agriculture, and now the only way to get their money back is to sell their land to the government. States, counties, and municipalities across the nation are writing bills and resolutions exposing the loss of land to try and stop it. But what is going on? Is there a real problem or just someone's imagination? To understand that, we have to go back to a meeting in Vancouver in 1976. At a UN conference, an action plan was created. Under the preamble to land, here's what the plan said. Land cannot be controlled by individuals and subject to the inefficiencies of the market. Private land is a principal means of accumulation of wealth and contributes to social injustice. If unchecked, it may become a major obstacle in the planning and implementation of development schemes. Social justice can only be achieved if land is used in the interests of society as a whole. The plan is saying it is unfair for people to own land, so the government needs to take it over. Now, this is the opposite of just about everything Americans stand for. And notice the words. Even though this is 40 years ago, they're talking about social justice, injustice, private property as a planning obstacle. Normally, this would be just crazy stuff, except William K. Riley signed on to the plan for the United States. He later became the administrator for the EPA under George H. Bush. In 1987, these same ideas were encapsulated in a UN report credited to Gro Brundtland and often called the Brundtland Report. In Chapter 2, they define the now familiar term, sustainable development. Development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. But how can you protect future generations when we only broadly know what their needs will be? Well, the authors had an answer for that. The report explains, if governments can control social equity or the society, economy, and the environment, the future will be okay. The problem is that means controlling everything. Again, this is a nutty idea that probably should have gone nowhere. But several non-governmental organizations, including the Sierra Club, ICLEI, and the Nature Conservancy, wrote a book called Agenda 21 that turned the report into a set of goals that were introduced at the Earth Summit in 1992. One of the goals was to create a wildlands project that literally forbade Americans to live in any of the red areas on this map and barely go near the yellow. Just as was written in the 1976 Vancouver plan, most urban people would be moved into high-density living in controlled urban areas. Those are the small black dots on the map. Again, this probably would not have meant much. Except that in 1993, President Clinton signed an executive order creating the President's Council on Sustainable Development. If you go to the UN's website, it says, the President's Council on Sustainable Development was conceived to formulate recommendations for the implementation of Agenda 21. That was it. No vote by the people, no say by Congress. It was just signed into law by the President. But it didn't stop there. Not only did the federal agencies abide by the new Agenda 21 recommendations, the NGOs that wrote Agenda 21 also sat on the same President's Council. Together they formed committees and wrote the regulations that are the laws we abide by. That is how a 1976 UN idea in Vancouver that was never even a treaty became a series of regulations managing our lives today. And here's how we know this is true. The Federal Register contains all government regulations. On page 45,157, it tells us, the EPA's Sustainable Development Challenge Grant Program is also a step in implementing Agenda 21, the Global Plan of Action on Sustainable Development, signed by the United States at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. But it's not just the EPA. If you look at HUD's 2010 funding notice for the Sustainable Communities Regional Planning Grant, on the first page it mentions the same economy, social equity, and environment as in the Brundtland Report. But it goes further. On page 58, the agreement mandates that if you create a regional plan for sustainable development, you must reduce social and economic disparities, you must decrease vehicle miles traveled, you must decrease housing costs, you must increase the proportion of low-income households. That is exactly what is contained in the original Agenda 21 goals. But these are not just gentle suggestions. You're being told what to do. Today, instead of the mandates above, HUD and the EPA use the 6 livability principles, which are virtually identical. By 2012, state agencies, national and regional associations across the country had signed on to the now mainstream idea of the Brundtland Report Sustainable Development. Few realized the origins or the sweeping personal and property restrictions they were promoting for future generations through planners, grants, and federal partnerships. To show you how serious this is, at a UN conference in 2002, Harvey Reuven said, "Individual wants, needs, and desires are to be conformed to the views and dictates of government planners. In the implementation of sustainable development, individual rights will have to take a backseat to the collective." Now, Harvey Reuven is not a nobody. He is one of the founders of ICLEI, the group that helped write federal regulations, and the clerk of the court in Dade County, Florida. Agenda 21, Sustainable Development, is not political. It is a global plan of action to protect the planet and reduce poverty by transferring wealth, converting private property into public control, moving families into high-density living. It comes to your community through federal regulations, grants, conservation easements, regional planning councils, and government-sponsored education projects. Piece by piece, this is becoming a reality. The only way to stop this is to reject planning that places our property and our lifestyles at risk. Our public officials are our last line of defense. We will work with you. We need your help.
As you have learned, there is a nationwide, indeed a global movement to change our traditional way of life with the ultimate goal of depriving you of your right to private property ownership. It's happening in every city, every county, and every state in America. But what does it look like on a local level? I will tell you how we discovered it right here in Vero Beach, Florida. In October of 2012, a group of very concerned citizens from Vero Beach attended a design charrette presented in the chamber of the County Commission office in Indian River County. The presentation was given by the Southeast Florida Regional Partnership HUD Grant Initiative under the new name of 750, meaning control of 7 counties within 50 years. Regionalism. Their mission, in their own words, was to effect changes in housing and transportation. In order to do this, they planned, and I quote, to transport millions of passengers from Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, and Orlando to Vero Beach in order to use our parks and beaches. Now, this was a stunning statement to a group of people who came to Vero Beach to live in a low-density population area. 750 further intended to establish a sustainable community adjacent to mass transit in our old downtown region. We asked, what is a sustainable community? It is a cluster of low-income, HUD, high-rise, stack and pack, high-density population human settlements with demographic quotas. We learned that the 750 group of regionalists, central planners, comprised of 200 unelected bureaucrats from outside our area, appointees that are unvetted by the public, who bypass the state level, contravene our Constitution, infiltrate our planning and zoning boards and our metropolitan planning organizations and our Chamber of Commerce and our city councils and county boards of commissioners. 750 offered locally elected officials $4.25 million in a housing and urban development grant without our knowledge, without our consent, without our vote, but with our tax dollars, in order to re-engineer our community into something that we would no longer recognize. Under their plan, locally elected officials would become obsolete. 750 controls the money, and they control the decision-making process and the plan. Working hand in hand with HUD, the DOT, and the EPA, the next step under DOT grants is to rezone your downtown area into mixed-use status and show you how the layout of your streets is all wrong. The next step is to narrow and pedestrianize those streets. The EPA, under the guise of
environmentalism will show you that automobiles are unnecessary and they will be deemed as unsustainable. But that's fine with them, because under the HUD grants, we will all be living in clusters of high-rise, stack and pack, low-income, high-density population, human settlements in their sustainable community. Your choices will be to walk, ride a bike, or use mass transit. Under a technique that will be used called tax-based sharing, a new practice that will tax private homes in the extreme to pay for the inner city, more commonly known as redistribution of wealth. The EPA, under newer regulations, will eventually deem single-family homes with their individually controlled air conditioners and wasteful irrigated lawns, and automobiles with their dirty carbon footprints as unsustainable. The 750 website makes everything look green and clean and so pristine, but one only has to look at these sustainable communities in Newark, New Jersey or Poughkeepsie, New York to see that these human settlements in compressed living spaces will result in high crime, drugs, and prostitution that turn these living areas into slums. These arrangements do not promote prosperity, they do not promote jobs, they erode capitalism, they create massive government dependency. As for mass transit, travel, every passenger rail system in the United States is broke. Not one of them operates at a profit. For every dollar that Amtrak makes, 90% of it is subsidized. And while all aboard Florida touts being a private company, it will inevitably resort to government subsidy in a fascistic arrangement called a public-private partnership, which simply means government in bed with big business. Think Solyndra, think Fisker, GM, and once the grant monies run out, and they will be running out because our country is broke, the taxpayer will be left to pay the tab. When we, the people of Vero Beach, became educated, we formed a citizens group called the American Coalition for Property Rights. Our mission statement was to provide educational material to the public so they could make an informed choice about whether or not they wanted a sustainable community. On December 18th, 2012, we made history in Indian River County when our commissioners voted no to 750. On January 8th of 2013, our city council also voted no. Indian River Shores also voted no, and our Indian River School Board opted out. We were the first in the state of Florida to do so. But Florida is not alone. In the last year, Arizona was the first state to pass a law banning Agenda 21, the parent of 750. Tennessee, Kansas, South Dakota, and Oklahoma have all passed legislation against Agenda 21. Most recently, Missouri joined the group. A list of cities listed front and back on 4 pages, from A to W, have voted no against Agenda 21. But for all the work that's being done to abolish Agenda 21 and its ancillary agents, there is so much more to be done. The only way to fight it in your area on a local level is to educate yourself. Educate your family and your friends. Find key speakers to provide presentation at your home and at your homeowners associations, clubs, civic organizations, and veterans groups. Do your homework. There are a long list of sources of information through Google, YouTube, and various websites. Conduct meetings in the conference rooms of your public libraries. Show educational videos and have question and answer periods. Make copies and brochures for distribution. Circulate a petition. Educate your locally elected officials. It is within your power to stop the encroachment of regionalism that will end your right to own private property. All it takes is an informed public. Attend your city council and county commission meetings. Speak under public comment and ask to be placed on the agenda at a future meeting. Fill every seat in the chamber and have your speakers ready to line up and speak. When locally elected officials see a large constituency of voters concerned about an issue, they will vote for it. No other reason than political expediency, but let's hope they will vote because they recognize the irreversible consequences of regionalism and the threat to our country that is Agenda 21. Join us in the fight to protect your right to own private property and your right to the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. For more information on how you can educate your community and stop 750, contact us at American Coalition for, the number 4, propertyrights.org or call 772-234-3995. Thank you.